It's the run to the line. Workman's off the track. He's got all 4 Michelin's over the white line. He's defending.
Everything interesting happens off the racing line.
All right, here we go. Episode 6. We just got back from AMP, Mike.
Atlanta Motorsports Park. How was that?
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah?
It was a new track for me. Elevation changes was definitely something new for me.
Not a lot of that down here?
No, not at all. What I liked about AMP was it wasn't a very fast track. That's not what I liked about it. What I did like, it was very technical. And obviously the elevation changes were just fantastic. So awesome. I highly recommend it.
We'll make a trip.
Anyways, our guest today, I've really been looking forward to this one. Our guest today has been racing longer than some of his competitors have been alive. And still, he finds a way to beat them. With over 3 decades behind the wheel, he's a multi-series champion and has stacked podiums across IMSA, SCCA, GT World Challenge, Pro Spec Miata Global Cup, and MX5 Cup. He's a wizard when it comes to car setup and data analysis, and somehow still has the energy to be the co-owner of FARA Racing, FARA Racing Series. Ooh, that was a mouthful. While still chasing podiums. Please welcome the podium magnet himself, Todd Buras.
Wow, welcome to the show, Todd. That was quite the introduction.
Yes. I don't know if I can follow that up, or I deserve quite that introduction, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
It makes it sound almost like he's a better driver than David Tuati himself.
Some would argue that he is. Now, I've only seen them out there on the track once, and that was at Autobahn, actually, behind the wheel of a street version of the GR86, which was fantastic.
That was a lot of fun. We had a good time. We were told not to do what we did, but yes, we did it anyway.
Little Days of Thunder car rental scene recreation.
Yes, that was exactly what I was thinking too. When we got out of the car, and there's a shot, and we'll do the overlay later, of Todd and David just both staring at the GR86 in the front wheels. The brakes are just smoking, and they're just laughing. Perfect. And the Mike Moore in me came out, the chief instructor in me came out and said, "You guys are the type of drivers that we hate in the academy."
Correct. Yes. Don't do that.
Yes.
Going out, we were told not to do that.
Yes.
We did it anyway.
Right.
We were side by side through multiple corners, but we all had a smile on our face.
Yeah. Here's something that we're going to get into later on, but what was, I think, pretty amazing to me in retrospect was you guys were going all out, and I was in the passenger seat while Todd was driving. He was chasing David Tuati, and at no point was I ever nervous, thinking, are we going to survive this one? Like, never crossed my mind, and they were, not leaving much on the table, which is big kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, exceptional driving.
You had that high degree of confidence because Todd has never crashed before, so you knew you were safe.
Well, we're going to get into that later. Not crash in front of me, at least not that I knew at the time. And then as we started speaking more in preparation for the podcast, and Todd, he's had a very long career in motorsports, so there's bound to be some wrecks.
If you knew then what you know now, you would not have gotten in the car.
Probably not.
Right. Okay.
All right. There's a caveat to that, right? We always go 9.5 versus 10. So when somebody's in the car, you always dial it back just a hair, and you always leave some on the table. So
for sure.
So yeah.
All right, let's get into it, Todd. You've been driving everything from spec Miatas to GT cars. What's the one car that made you think, this one might bite me?
The one that might bite me.
Yeah.
Irish Mike and I developed a Hyundai Genesis back in 2011 when they just came out. We put one on the dyno, and it was truly 300. It's the Evo motor, and we looked at each other and said, we've got to do it. Six end-link, multi-end suspension, horrible transmission, but we made it work. It was truly a car that was special. A lot heavy, long, took a lot to set it up. But I thought it was so fast in ST in Grand Am Cup that it was going to be a lot of fun. And it was. It was actually a winner. We were extremely fast. It was one of those questions of, how fast do you really want me to go? Do you want me to show the true colors of this car? And it always, 204s at Daytona and ST, and to high 203s. It was back in 2010. That would qualify for the Daytona 24-hour now. So, back in the day in 2010. But yes,
but you were still nervous about that car going into it.
It was a really cool looking car, but really the chassis and platform, transmission and everything was just a little off, not quite built for what we were doing for. So, yeah.
One of the interesting things as we discussed your path into motorsports is that you started in, I would assume, like most people do, in the corporate world. You were fairly high up in the corporate world. So I'm curious as to how you got your start in motorsports and perhaps how some of those skills that you had in the corporate field transferred over to the racing field.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, lots of different things. So I grew up flying remote control airplanes, so eye hand coordination, big pattern ships, and then started flying. I built my own aircraft, a little Acro 1, and flew that. That was a fully aerobatic airplane, and that was a lot of fun. So I got my pilot's license early on, and then realized that flying aerobatics is not very safe. So I thought, let's go into motorsports. So I turned my first wheel.
Perfect. Yes. How's that worked out?
It's, at 30 years old. So my first car experience was 30 years old, and loved it ever since.
What did you do in the corporate world? Just give us a little background.
30-second overview. I started, my father owned a company called J-Mart Computers back in the late 80s, before there were, the home PC. Mm-hmm. It was the home PC build. And so I got big time into computers. Bought the company from my father in Atlanta, sold that off 2 years later, and then went for Unix mainframes. So I did architecture design of Unix infrastructure before there was an internet. Mm-hmm. So it was all dial up, 9600 baud, not even 9600 baud modems at the time. So EMC, HP Unix, concurrent, non-concurrent architecture design of data warehouses for Chick-fil-A, Delta, Boston Market, and a bunch of defense contractors that I can't mention. And, it was web application database servers, and they would all dial in and say, why did you sell 3,600 Happy Meals in Portland versus, right down the street in California? And it was because of weather. So it would go through these big web application database servers and go from there.
And that's what you or your team essentially built.
Yeah, so at a young age, we did the architecture design. I was internal sales at that point, and then went external. And so we did the Delta very first baggage claim back in 96 or whatever it was, and that was a $15 million Delta warehouse off 24 left on the airport. So kind of cool.
Tell us a little bit about some of the cars that you've driven over the years. Offline, you and I spoke about some of these cars, and you mentioned like an Oldsmobile, and I couldn't imagine it. I actually, while we were talking on the phone, I had to look it up. I'm like, an Oldsmobile, really? Tell us a little bit about those cars and what have been some of your favorite cars.
The Oldsmobile SCX was the Achieva. It was a dual overhead cam, quad 4 dual overhead cam, made crazy horsepower. It was a front wheel drive, out of control car. It was running the Motorola Cup back in the day, and it was a hacker's car, and I bought it and said, this is going to be fun. And Tom Fowler, OPM Motorsports, he and I put it together, and it was a lot of fun. And we actually bandaged it Honda because we had a Prelude, we had an ITA CRX, we had an ITB Honda Accord back in the day, 88 Honda Accord and 90 whatever CRX, and had a lot of fun with those cars. So yeah, it was good. There's been mostly front wheel drive I grew up in, and then moved to the Miata in 2003 or 2, and then from there went IMSA and Global Cup.
So you've raced a lot of different cars.
Yep.
What has been the allure to keep going back to racing Miatas?
That's a good question. Actually, that's come up quite a few times. I raced some of the best cars on the planet and just blessed to do it. And then the back of my mind, the community surrounding Spec Miata was always in the back of my mind. I had one, kept it, couldn't wait to get back to it. The community, the closeness, I remember going to Lime Rock in 2005, and we qualified ninth. Or it was the last practice, and I was ninth. And I was .009 off the pole. And literally it was 001, 002, 003 through 9, and I was ninth. Wow. And I called Kaelyn Harmer, and I called my wife, and I said, I'm ninth, and I can't be upset because I'm .009 off the pole.
Right.
And he said, well, do something different. I'm like, what? And he goes, just try something different. You're obviously got to pick up a little. So I went into a corner and I tried something different. I picked up 2/10 and I was P1. So, it was one of those things that you just don't get in any other class.
So it's the community. It was community driven that made your decision easy.
It was, yeah, and such closeness. A close friend was John Doonan, and in Mazda. And it's funny because one of a great story, we were in Canadian Motorsports Park, and there was 43 cars, all the new 2006 Mazda MX-5, and mine had a pickup, right? Mine, it just and he said, well, I've got a rental car, a Canadian rental car. And next morning I came to the track, and sure enough, the cluster, the key fob, Rob Greenwood had switched it all out from the rental car to my car. So I was the only Global Cup car that had Canadian parts, the dash, the key fob, and the immobilizer, on the track.
Yeah.
And, that weekend we won. So everybody's like, oh, Canadians got better, ECUs and stuff. But that wasn't the case. So that car's still floating around somewhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You and I also talked about a couple different subjects, and hopefully we'll be able to cover most of it because Todd has some fascinating stories. One of those is how you consistently got picked up as a driver from different teams,
right?
And that other drivers would end up resenting you because of it. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to do that, and what value you provided for those teams.
So I have a very close friend, Kaelyn Harmer. He was a data engineer. So in 2003, we were using stack data. It was stack on the dash, and we had full-blown data. And we were racing pretty good, and we were winning a lot of races, and I was moving up. I was in IMSA, and I was running good with Piper Motorsports, and we were winning a bunch of races. And, Kaelyn was my engineer at BSI Racing, and I asked him, I said, how do I become Randy Popst? How do I become Johnny O'Connell? And he said, do you want to? And I was like, I think I do. And he said, well, you've come from a very good background in business, and you've retired once and at 30 or at whatever. And he said, make racing a hobby and make your family priority. And I looked at him and I thought, okay, so what does that mean? And he said, always bring the car back better than you started. And, always ask for your name on the door with no crash damage, and do engineering and data for the teams. So I never asked for any money, and I was racing against guys like Eric Foss and Charles Espenlaub and Randy Popst and things of that nature, and always had my name on the door with no crash damage. And I would do engineering data and video analysis for the entire team, and always bring the car back better than I got in it. And what does that mean, right? That means that if I finished fifth or second, I just went to the owner and I'd say, I could have finished first, but first was being a jackass, and I'd rather not have a donut on your pretty wrap and bring it back in second or fifth or whatever the number was. Usually it was in the top 5, and then ding up your car because it didn't cost them anything. And their car finishing in the top 5 meant new people would come to their team and rent cars. So we had a pretty big team everywhere I went because of the car was finishing well. And, I would data engineer the car and engineer the shocks. And I had a great friend, Irish Mike, and I'd call him up, and Kaelyn Harmer, and I'd say, hey, I got a center off push, coming out of 6 and 7. He's like, well, that's super high speed, increase the compression in the rear and it'll get rid of the push off the center off. And sure as shit, now we pick up 3 or 4 tenths, put us, instead of P9, P4, and, we do all right.
So for some of the people that might not understand, when you say help engineer the car, you're help to dial it in.
Correct. Yeah. And the deal is there's a big difference between getting in a car and driving it and saying, God, I need a new set of tires every 30 minutes versus getting in it and tires lasting 6 hours.
Sure.
You have the tires do their job without doing their job, and have the suspension do all the work. And that's a difficult thing to do, but that's what was drilled down for me from some of the best data engineers out there.
Right.
Colin Harmer, Irish Mike, and some of the other, guys out there that really understand camber, caster, toe, rake, setup, thrust, compression, rebound, high speed, low speed. And it's a phone call away. And it's a beautiful thing when you talk to these guys and pick up the phone and say, look, going through one, it feels like I'm at the end of the shock and the thing's going to shake my head off and just fly off in the dirt. Oh, just increase the high-speed rebound. You got high-speed rebound? Yeah, I do. Give it 5 clicks. Oh, wow. Picked up 3 tenths through turn 1. Pretty crazy stuff.
So that kind of leads into my next set of questions. In fact, I was just on the phone with a young driver. He's 16 years old, wants to get into racing, and he was just picking my brain left and right. What advice would you give young drivers that want to get into racing or are already starting to get into racing as far as getting as much seat time cheaply or inexpensively or free? What advice would you give them to do that?
Tough question, especially today. I was 30 and I got rides, which is incredibly difficult and hard to even fathom. A new person coming into racing would have to be female.
Okay.
Unless you're Connor Zilic. Basically, when it's funny, I have a friend, Noah Harmon, and I told him that, he's incredibly talented. And Connor Zilic, another one. When you bust into the scene on Global Cup, he's running TA2, be incredibly just unheard of, right? You get into the car, buy the car, run it a year, show up, and dominate the field. And then leave. And it was like, what just happened? Guys that have been running these cars, Noah Harmon, for instance, been running these cars for the last 5 years and TA2 and show up out of the blue and finish P4, and never been in the car, never been to that track in that car and show up, engineer the car and show up and do that. And that's kind of what, a couple guys are doing. And it's very difficult. And, there's a lot of energy at women right now in motorsports. Women's initiatives and things of that nature, and I would take advantage of that also.
So I think when you mentioned Connor Zilic, you're talking about maybe a 1%er, if not,
That's probably too much.
Yes,
that's even even high.
You're talking about a guy that gets in anything and wins. So most people are not going to fall into that bucket. So maybe what I'm hearing is your advice is learn how to dial in a car so you can be an asset to that team.
Absolutely. You'll be on a team, and really the best friend I had on a team was the owner. And it was, you get to a team, I get a phone call and say, hey, Piper Motorsports, they're running 34th and 39th. Can you go over there? And I went over there, and first thing I did was I talked to the owner, and then I talked to the data engineer. And he said, the BMW 328, gorgeous cars, massive push. I'm like, all right, tell me the setup. They'd start walking through it, and I'm like, okay, make these changes, these changes, these changes. And, we went from 39th to 4th and 8th, both cars, and then we finished 5th and 9th at Daytona 24-hour, and then we went to Laguna, and I finished 2nd. I got in the car 21st, finished 2nd, and then we went to VIR and finished 3rd on the podium, and 2 podiums in a row. And it was cars that wouldn't, that were dead last to, and literally it's shocks, camber, caster, toe, that kind of adjustment, but you just have to know what you're feeling for and what you're looking for, because you can get a car to go fast, but if you don't know you're tearing up the tires and you're not having the suspension work, what good is it? 2 hours, 3 hours into the race.
Sure.
We got the VWs, when we were running GLIs, we got the VWs to drag the rear tires around for 3 weekends and just put new tires on the front. The new tires would go to the rear and put 2 new tires on the front. So literally we were buying 4 tires a weekend. The Hyundais, we got it to where we weren't buying tires much at all because the tires didn't do much. The suspension did all the work. So, yeah.
All right, let's transition over to some of the less happy times, some of the wrecks that you've been involved in, some losses, personal, financial, whatever the case is. How do things like that affect you, and how do you bounce back from those things? If you can talk a little bit about some specific, instances.
I was very fortunate. When I first started racing, R.S. Arginian was my coach. And he said, before we even start, there's 3 things you got to know. All right. So 1 was racing is dangerous and you could lose your life. 2, when you get in a wreck, and I thought, I'm never going to get in a wreck. Who's going to get in a wreck? Why am I going to get in a wreck? And he's like, when you get in a wreck, you drive the car all the way to the point where you're going to get in a wreck.
Right.
And then when you do, you close your eyes, and in the most intense moment of your life, you have to relax. I mean, not just relax every fiber in your body. So we were doing, my first year of racing, I was roundy round. I was running roundy round in a Pinto, back in
Right.
Back in 1996.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Oh, it's horrible. But it was Peach State Motor Speedway, the fastest half-mile asphalt racing in Georgia. And it was just like Bristol. It was a half mile. And we were turning 21 seconds in a Pinto. It's flying. And I was running second. And man, out of 2, a tire went down and I was sideways and I saw 48 cars coming at me. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. And I just relaxed, and I think I got hit 9 times. It was bad. And I popped right out of the car, stood on the roof, and kind of threw my hands up in the air and said, yay, and the crowd went nuts, because it's redneck racing on a Friday night.
Yeah.
And the car was, you couldn't even, they had to use a forklift to get it on.
Sure.
They just left it there because it was so trashed. But, yeah, so in the most intense moment of your life, you have to wreck. There was a Virginia wreck. I've gotten a bunch, but Virginia was a big one. 6, 7 ribs.
You were driving the Irish Mike VW. Right.
It was Derek Wittes and Mark Pombo, and we were running P2 out of 49 cars. Altenberg and all these guys were in that race. And a doctor that, back in the day, IMSA, that was 2010. You went to Daytona and you filled out your 5x7 card. You gave them $50. And they said, do you know how to drive a 5-speed? I'm like, I think so. Perfect. You're in. And that's what IMSA requirements to go race,
Sounds like
IMSA
Champ
was.
Car.
It's Champ Car. You didn't need a license. You didn't need to be checked out. So I filled out my 5x7 card. And this back in 2004, but this is 2010. And a doctor, I think his name's Brzezinski, and he lives in my neighborhood. Was in an M3, was in a really nice M3, and he spun out of South Bend. I came over the top following somebody so close that I couldn't see. So I came out and he went woof. And I thought, okay, I got this. And I turned the wheel and nothing happened. Well, the car behind me, and I touched the brakes. I didn't realize I touched the brakes, but the car behind me at 93 miles an hour touched me, and it picked up the rear tires of a front wheel drive car. And I thought, and it was about, 15 feet away at the time. And I thought, oh, okay. And I just relaxed.
I watched that wreck.
You did?
On video.
Oh, yeah, I did.
It hurt
up?
watching it. We'll put it up on overlay, but I think I watched it. They followed it. They did like the live view, as it happened, and then they did like a slow-mo, and I had to turn it off. At the slow-mo, I was like, okay, that's enough. Like, I don't need to see that again. It was that bad.
How many bones have you broken?
Well, that was 7 ribs and lower back and shoulder and collarbone. And then I was with ESR and broke 3 more. And then in 2019 runoffs, I was on a motorcycle and Steve Burtock ran me off the motorcycle, and I broke 2 more. So that year I won the runoffs in SM Spec Miata. And my friends are just like, dude. And then Jim and I got together at Virginia and broke 2 more, wrecked a car, got 2 more broken. And then just recently I was in a wreck at Tampa St. Pete.
St. Pete, yeah.
St. Pete, and ended up, they didn't think I broke anything, but I went to Watt Family Chiropractic, and he's my guy. And he puts you up and he does the big crosses and scans you. And he goes, "Oh, you broke one here, two here. You fractured your sternum, and then the little wing in the middle of your back, you fractured that too." So yeah, that was bigger than I thought. That was a big hit.
So you're into the 20s or 30s.
You
stopped
are.
counting, basically.
To answer your question, Mike,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
20s or 30s. It's a lot. And it's funny, when I broke in 2010, I had to figure out how to get out of bed. Because there was so much stuff that wasn't right. Yeah. You couldn't use any of your muscles, right? You couldn't use your ribs or anything. And it's amazing how much you use those muscles to get out of bed. So I figured out if I put my leg up and hooked it with my hand as I stood up, I would scream at the top of my lungs. And my kids, they were 4 or 5 years old, and they still remember, "Dad, I remember you screaming at the top of your lungs to get up out of bed." That's one thing they remember. And my wife just rolls her eyes. God bless her. So, yeah.
Core memories, right?
Yeah, core memories.
How old are the kids now?
18 and 17 off this August, off to UF, my oldest.
Do they do any motorsports stuff?
No. I met my wife at the race.
Right, they remember that. Right?
Remember Dad screaming at the top of his lungs.
I won't do that. Right. We're going to go fly fishing instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's choose something a little safer.
I met my wife at the racetrack at Daytona Beach International Raceway. I met her father 3 years earlier. He did not tell me he had 2 daughters.
Right.
So I was at Daytona International, and he's like, "Hey, I'm about to start." He raced VWs against Twatty. My wife raced against Twatty. Todd Fliss and Twatty and a whole bunch of guys. Stu Bremer was BSI, and she was racing a Scirocco. Nice. And it was about to start Jim Anderson's race, and he said, "Hey, my RV's over there. Why don't you watch the race? Go up there. I've got a big green flag." I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything. So there was a 5'6" tall blonde sitting up there, and I was invited to come up, and that's how I met Debbie, my wife of 24 years, and
so that's why your wife is unfazed when she gets phone calls from the hospital telling her that her husband has multiple broken ribs, and she's like, "I'll be over."
Yeah, there goes Todd again.
Yep. That's funny because at VIR I was pinned to I got out of the car, and everything, the whole thing was planned there, and you see me get out and collapse on the ground, and the doctor from Melbourne runs over and he unzips my thing and he goes, "Oh, you have multiple broken bones. Take a big deep breath." So I breathed in really heavy, and they went back in place, and I just screamed, and oh gosh, it was the worst thing ever. But she saw all that on TV. So when the emergency guys in the transport go into Virginia International whatever hospital, they put the phone on my ear, said, "Dial up your wife," and she answered. She goes, "Hey, honey, I just watched it on TV. You all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I'm okay." I'm like, "Yeah, he's got some broken bones and some other stuff going on, but he'll be all right." And she's like, "All right, well, let me know when you'll be home."
Sure.
Have those roles ever been reversed where you watched her get in a wreck?
That's a great question. No. But I will tell you, my close friend Jim Drago at East Street has a standing bet, or standing, what do you want to say, for my wife. My wife was a 3-time ECR champion. She won, and that's against Twatty and things of that nature. She won the ECR series 3 years in a row. And then she jumped into Miatas, and my friend Jim Drago, who runs ESR, never beat her in a Miata. So he's like, "I will build her an A+ car at no cost and put her in it because I want to beat her." So that's the standing joke between Jim and I. So right. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. There's a good video of my wife out there running, and you may want to put it out. Debbie does VIR, and it's when we raced in Miatas, and she started 4th, and there's a lot of good in-car.
Have you ever raced against her?
A lot.
How is that? It just all gloves come off?
Yeah, it's funny because Stu Bremer at BSI Racing, he would always take care of our cars. And so we used to run the Enduro series, the ECR series, and the SCCA, and he held me 5 minutes one time. I finished second. My wife finished first. That's the one time she beat me. But she was very competitive, very, and extremely good, very competitive.
She still do it?
As soon as she became a mom and pregnant with our first kid, It was over. She said, "I'm done. I'm not going to race anymore," and became a full-blown mom. And I couldn't doubt her for it. And to this day, she won't get in a car. She drives some pretty radical cars on the street, and she has fun. So
Nice.
And the kids drive pretty radical too. So it's fun.
One of the things that I noticed when we were at Autobahn and you were driving, not competing against David Tuati in the street GR86, and I was on the passenger seat. I mentioned that I wasn't nervous at all, and then I asked Todd if he would ride shotgun with me, and kind of just help me learn the course. One of the things I picked up on is you were a lot more nervous than I was expecting you to be, and I think some of that comes from
The terrible person that was driving?
No, he was actually really good.
This is why I like Mike on this show, because he'll throw little jabs like that, and they're just so perfect
I
timing.
just speak the truth.
Yes. So I would assume that some of that just comes from like personal loss, because if you stay in the sport long enough, like you will heal from the broken ribs and things like that, but you're gonna lose friends. And so my question is, how do you address that? How do you overcome that?
That's a tough question. That gets pretty serious. We've had a lot of driving instructors. I've known a lot of driving instructors, 2, 3, that have passed in the passenger seat for not very good reasons. And so it's interesting. I'll with the Collegiate Racing Series that we're involved with now, I was sitting the first time in the passenger seat in 15 years. And it was a friend, and his name was Jack Hobbs. He's the founder of CRS. And I didn't realize it, but I got pretty vocal with him.
You told me.
Yeah, I was pretty stingent. I said, listen, I'm going to sit right seat, but you are going to do everything I tell you. And before I knew it, I was at the top of my lungs because I've lost multiple friends and to people being stupid. And he's sitting there, like a little mouse, and I'm kind of like a lion going, if you don't listen to what I say, then I'm pulling the e-brake and we're done.
Sure.
And I didn't realize how uppity I was getting because I was a little uppity.
Yeah.
And there were multiple times in the passenger seat that I got a little uppity, and like if I jumped in with Twatty or with you or Michael or somebody that I knew, but somebody new to the track who thinks, oh, I got a Mustang and it's going to do everything I want it to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't understand that a 40-mile-an-hour impact against a wall is like 110. It hurts, especially with the 3-point belt, without the the Hans safety and all the equipment that we use. It's pretty intense.
That's something we like to talk a lot about, instructor stories on the podcast. And this is a topic that I like to bring up, hence the name Off the Racing Line. I like to talk about these things that aren't normally or usually talked about, because there have been instructors that have lost their lives just instructing. So there's a very serious consequence when you don't take that job seriously. And sometimes it's completely outside of our control anyway. It could be a malfunction with the car, blown tire, or something can go wrong. But I like to highlight that as much as possible, that there's I think a beauty behind instructing. I think it takes a special person to get in the right seat and want to share that information and experience with a novice driver. But at the same time, I think it also takes somebody with a few loose nuts in there to do so. I think it's a calculated risk, and I've said it before in different episodes that I finally reached that point where I was like, okay, I think I've had enough of that, and I choose to do something else.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, you are talking about is it a risk? Absolutely. Is it a calculated risk that, especially with most of the people, obviously, Todd, you're out there instructing people when you were in the right seat that are looking for that last 10th on the entire lap, where generally speaking in the HPD environment that myself and most of the coaches that I know it's people that are leaving 5-6 seconds on the table, so you can help them find 3 seconds with a still pretty good margin of error and relative comfort.
Sure.
I totally agree with what you're saying. Yeah, there's a big difference, and then you just really have to make sure he's not out there to impress you.
Right.
And that was a situation this past weekend, or our last school, the yellow Porsche guy.
At Homestead.
At Homestead.
Yeah.
Dave was coming up behind us. Dave Twatty was in his car, and he was going up behind us. And he really wanted to get down into 11, or down in off the banking. 10.
Yeah.
And the car, he held the input. He didn't relax his hands out. Held the input. I literally reached across and pulled it out because it was turned.
Right.
And Twatty came out and he goes, "Man, you guys were 90 degrees to the track." And I went, yank, and the thing straightened right out. So, yeah. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. It's not worth it to, and I saw it was wall, and he just saw wall, and like I said. And then a few laps later, I was like, you got to stop doing it. And he did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I did it again, and I said, in the pits.
Yep.
Interesting, Kaelyn Kenny,
The 16-year-old.
the 14-year-old, 16-year-old.
You just finished competition instructor school with us.
Yes.
She, fantastic. She sits right seat, and that Corvette guy, the guy in the Corvette. Anyway, you recall? Anyway, so she made him go down pit lane like 3 times because he made an illegal pass. He did something wrong. Extremely strong-willed little girl.
Very assertive.
Very assertive.
No, her mentors spoke very highly of her. Said, "Oh, she did a great job, good command. Wasn't intimidated at all. That there was a guy that was 2 or 3 times her age sitting in the driver's seat. She had absolutely no problem taking control of the situation."
Incredible. And I took multiple videos of her,
Yeah.
giving him the finger, and Mark is the father, and he and I sat back and just sat there and smiled because it was just, here's a girl I met 2 years ago at instructor school, or at a comp school, and now she's just blossoming into this instructor and mentor and just unbelievable driver.
Yeah.
So, and she understands data. I gave him a laptop, and she has data in all her cars, and she's going over data with Jack and all the the kids in the comp schools, and really giving lots of instructions. So I got to give it up.
One of the things I'm picking up about her is that she seems to also really enjoy instructing and coaching and being part of the team and helping new drivers.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, it's a fantastic family. Bill and Mark and Kaelyn and the mom, they're all in it. They're all in it to win it. And I wish them the best.
One of the things that you and I, again, Todd and I have had several conversations offline, and we were having this one conversation over the phone, and you were telling me about finishing the race with the car that you have. Yeah. Now, to bring you up to speed and the listeners, what that means is you might have started the race with a car in a certain state, but after a couple of knocks here and there, your suspension is maybe getting worn out. Your toe, your alignment is now, gone. Are you just going to, throw your hands up in the air, or are you going to finish the race with the car that you have? How have you been able to adjust to the car that you now have in the middle of a race and still be able to come up from behind and finish, and hit a podium essentially?
That's, and that's something Stu Bremer and Tom kind of worked into the whole thing, and Jim. You have to, the ideal setup, right? You got all these practices, and you work on toe and cross weights, and you go out on the first lap, and you're door to door and side by side, and somebody, bam, all of a sudden you got toe in on the left front, and the thing pushes like a pig, So it's like, well, okay, a pushy car, I'm going to drive like a front drive car. So I'm going to brake later, brake deeper, get the turn done before the corner, and come off, like a front drive car. So been blessed to drive multiple different styles of cars, and they all want something different. So yeah, you can get frustrated, and you can get I call it the spite. You can get frustrated and you can get pissed off, or just drive the car you got and see what happens. Because if you can figure it out, especially in Global Cup, those guys are running over curbs, and you run over the curb and the inside toe gets pulled out, and all of a sudden you've got an inch of toe in each front. it's going to turn in like son of a gun, like nothing you've ever seen before. So just hit the brakes a little later and turn in a little later and come off, or whatever it wants, whatever the car wants. But there's no use getting on the radio and complaining about it, because I'd probably say over 90% of the time you never come in with the car that you went out with, or
Right.
that you wanted with. And you just have to figure out how to drive the car you have. It's funny because we talked about this year in January, we ran Daytona in the Global Cup car. And Irish Mike, my friend, was talking about the cars, and he's like, dude, the toe is going to get completely screwed after the first 4 or 5 laps.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. So literally going down the East Horseshoe, West Horseshoe, I was 20 degrees to the left to turn right. Hit the brakes, hold the wheel that way, and right when the car's about to catch, crank the wheel in and hit the power. And if you watch my in-car, which we can post here, you can see that I'm later on the power than everybody else, but the car wouldn't turn right.
Right.
And it's all right. It would turn left pretty good. But East Horseshoe, West Horseshoe, I'm literally hit the brakes, sliding to the left, and as soon as it catch, I'd turn right to go through West Horseshoe. So, and the bus stop was even worse. So it's like you just either give up completely and get frustrated, or kind of smile and enjoy it and say, all right, this is what I've got. Let's
Enjoy
see
the
what
chaos.
happens. Enjoy the chaos. And that's what it was. It was, if you watch the in-car and you watch my hands, I'm literally turned 15 degrees to the left and we're going right. I'd hit the brake and okay, catch, and turn right in the last 5 or 6 laps. So it's, it's drive what you got.
It's the battle behind that's important. And down on the inside, Jared Thomas gets a brilliant run out of the Le Mans chicane.
Watch Cicero.
This is not going to be over yet. Big bump on the leader as they come on the low side. Cicero was hung out to dry a little bit. He got a good run, but didn't have a dancing partner. Now they come up to the back of Western Workman. The checkered flag is in hand. Is it going to be Thomas? Is it going to be Buras? Messenger, I think, is just a little bit out of it. Is the dive on the inside underneath the yellow line as they go across the line? It's Thomas by the barest of margins. A classic Whelen Mazda MX-5 Cup finish, with Jared Thomas taking it from Todd Buras, JTR from AAG, McCunley McAllen.
A lot of that, I think a lot of that also comes down to experience, right? So, and we talk a lot about that on this show, about getting a lot of seat time.
Right.
So whether it's, and not just seat time, but also go to different tracks. Like you, drive a lot of different cars, because that way, when things go wrong, and in racing, things will go wrong, you can start relying on a lot of that information that you've acquired over the years of driving different tracks, different cars. You can tap into that and say, okay, now the car's pushing, I got to adjust my driving accordingly.
Absolutely, 100%. Yes.
One of the things that you and I talked about, and I don't know, I think I had an epiphany when you were talking about just drive the car that you have. I drew a parallel to life, right? So racing is a lot like life, right? You have to finish the race. So are you going to complain about it, or are you going to adjust your driving so you can finish in, at least hit podium or something along those lines? So I think life is the same way, like you may not have started with, a broken marriage or, broken ribs or what have you. Like, stuff is going to happen along the way. Are you just going to give up, or are you going to finish the race? Adjust your life accordingly and do the best with what you have right now.
And that's, it's funny about racing. So in 96, when I started racing, the relationships that were built, Tom Fowler, Stu Bremer, Jim Drago, Jim Daniels, the list goes on. Pick up the phone, and they say if you have 2 good friends that that you could call today, I could literally pick up the phone, and I'm so blessed that I could pick up the phone and call more than a handful of people, and they'd pick it up, and it'd be instantly catching up to what you had in 96. I haven't talked to you in 15 years, but oh my gosh. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we went to where we're A&P, and I was in Mark Kinley's trailer, and somebody had pulled up, and somebody pulled up really close. So like you couldn't even get a car out. And I'm like, who is this guy pulling right? And sure enough, I know the guy, Bell, and I walk up and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, big hugs and kisses. And I hadn't seen the guy in 20 years.
Yeah.
But, he's like, thank God you knew that guy. So, because I didn't want to get ugly about parking so close. So it's the relationships developed over the years, and still have fantastic relationships. And everybody that races, is always anticipating the next race. So do I have that extra, ice cream sandwich? Let's leave that off the table because, we got to be in somewhat good shape. I mean, look at you and look at you, somewhat good shape to go get in the car. So it's like, a lot of guys our age that raced with us. Look at Twatty, look at Jose, look at those guys, they work out like fiends because the intense mental focus that takes to run these against 18-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids, 12-year. I mean, look at F4, right? The F4 guys are 12 to 16.
Yeah.
Ultimate focus, right? And we're up there. Sorry.
That's something that blows my mind when I see you racing still, this year in the MX5 Cup, and you're racing against guys like Connor Zillage. And I remember when I was, looking for some pictures on your Facebook so to use for the promo for the episode, and I saw a picture of you, and Connor was like right behind you. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
You've raced with some pretty cool people.
Over the years, I remember Laguna Seca, Chip Hare. I remember we were at Laguna, and Popes and I were decently good friends, and I was P1, and he was, he got after the first session, and I said, how'd you do? He goes, I was P5. And I said, what's wrong? And he goes, well, the left front shock's dead. And I said, the left shock's dead? And he goes, yeah. And I told the engineer, but he didn't believe me, so they're going to make some adjustments. We go out. End of P2, he was P7. Guess what? They're changing the left front shock. So, he knows a thing or two about cars. And, not for that, but it goes back to what you said about knowing. I'm not sure what you said. I'm not sure if I went down the right path there, but
that's okay.
It's okay. That's life. But it's keeping a sharp mental focus about what you're doing in life, and not making the wrong decisions in life, and not making the wrong decisions on track.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right.
All right. We are going to move over to my new favorite segment, which is rapid fire questions.
Oh boy.
So
don't worry, it's just a made-up name. We usually answer in like 5 minutes. It's just like we just go on and on and on. There's really no rapid fire about it.
All right.
So
cool.
hopefully the questions are rapid and the answers are equally as rapid. So try to keep them nice and short. So here we go. Number one, I'm going to start with you, Mike. Favorite track?
Just because it was so new and I've only been there once, I got to go with Road Atlanta.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah.
What about you, Todd?
Favorite track?
Yeah.
The rapid fire is going great.
Oh, yeah. It would have to be Canadian Motorsports Park.
I've driven that on iRacing, and I loved it. I hope to one day, actually drive it, but I thought it was a fantastic track.
Or Three Rivers. Trois Rivières.
Okay.
Three Rivers in Canada. That track was insane. That is insane. But as far as fun goes, VIR or Canadian Motorsports Park. Yep.
I've only driven a handful of tracks, so I would still have to stick with Sebring as my number one.
Not a bad choice.
David Meyer always says that, like once you go to like something like Watkins Glen, like you'll realize that is a real track. So hopefully that's actually a good lead into my second question. Bucket list track.
I want to go to Ozarks.
Ozarks, okay.
I mean, Spa if we're going global, but but in the U.S. of somewhere where I actually may make it in the next couple of years, I would go Ozarks.
Okay. What about you, Todd?
I would tell you go to Pitt.
Pit race.
Pitt, unbelievable facility.
Really?
Unbelievable track. If Pitt would be, it's the ultimate roller coaster ride. It is by far one of the best tracks out there.
Okay.
Pittsburgh.
What's your bucket list track that you have not done yet?
Spa, probably.
Okay.
I'm not much for the Nürburgring or any of those tracks over there, but probably Spa.
All right. For me, it's probably going to be Laguna Seca.
Oh yeah. Great track.
All right. Question number 3. One car you would race purely for the chaos of it, not because it's good, just because it's insane.
I want to try the Pinto that Todd mentioned.
Right?
earlier. That sounds fantastic.
Yes.
The Pinto is amazing. Truly incredible car, the Pinto. Not many left in the world.
Something crazy that
Something
you'd wanna be
crazy
like,
that I'd want
Let's
to.
see. Let's see what happens.
Let's see. I've always been afraid to run a open wheel car, like a Formula car.
Okay.
So like a Formula Atlantic or, the F4 guys. I would love to run that car. Scared to death to run that car, but like a Formula 4.
Would you fit in that?
I don't know. I don't know if 6'2", 220 pounders fit in those things.
You've had one too many ice cream sandwiches.
The first car that came to mind when I was putting together this question was the Viper. It just sounds like a stupid, scary car that, let's see what happens, But yeah, I think the open wheel Formula would be a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
All right, question for you, Todd. Who's the best driver you've ever gone wheel-to-wheel racing with?
Oof. There's been a lot. In Spec Miata, if you look at the history of Spec Miata, we've had Preston Pardis, 4-time national SM champion, Jim Drago, 2-time national, Nick Broomy, 2-time national. Best driver I've gone up against, probably the most wily. I've run. There's a lot.
You've ran with some big names.
Yeah. Popst.
I actually have a Randy Probst question for you.
Popst.
I was watching some in-car. I think he was at a Chin event with Coda, and he was doing some private coaching and somebody in a GT4 RS or something. And I guess he went out for his client, laid down a good, a couple of data laps so the guy could work with it.
Right.
And the in-car camera, he's driving with one hand on the wheel the entire lap. It's insane.
I have that problem too.
Really?
I drive all the time with one hand, mostly in the grass. I would have to say Connor, Preston, Popst, Espenlaub, Altenberg. There so many Daniels. There's so many guys that are Foss, just incredible drivers. Just got and I always say the real quick response is to go 10/10ths with a lot of these guys is equal, right? So you can run and you win on a Sunday and they win on a Saturday and you're running together. The guys that are above that, the Schumacher, the Max, the Connor, there's only a handful.
Mm-hmm.
And
to go above 10/10.
To go above 10/10ths, and their 9/10ths is your 10/10ths.
Yeah.
And they pull something else out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, where'd that come from? Sure. How in the heck do they do that? And it's so rare. And when you see it, it's just this shining star. And you don't see it often, but when you do, it's pretty special. Preston, I said it already.
All right, so let's try to continue this rapid fire that's slowing down.
So well so far.
Yeah, right. Go ahead.
Okay, favorite thing about racing or track driving?
Instructing.
You like instructing, okay?
Well, other than winning at Super Lap Series, of course.
Sure, of course. What about you, Todd?
It used to be. It's more about giving back now. I'm really enjoying.
I noticed that.
I'm really enjoying. For the last, there's always been a line out the door in the trailer for going over data with guys. Uh-huh. But now giving back more to the students and to what you've brought to the table, the HPDE stuff, the comp school, giving back to people. I'm really, really enjoying that.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've noticed that at comp school. It seems like you kind of found your place that you're really comfortable in.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. I'm blessed to be super competitive still, but giving back to people that say, "Hey, how do you, or what do you, or how, what's the set?" So, yeah, answering those questions.
All right. 6 minutes, 6 questions. Let's see if we can get through this.
Here we go.
Number 6. If this ever happens, my wife will force me to quit racing or track driving.
Huh.
Wow.
I mean, I guess if it was a bad accident, I'm sure that would be an honest conversation we'd have with each other.
Yeah. A few broken ribs, stuff like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
What about you, Todd?
That's not one for my wife because
Obviously.
5 months ago I came home with a bunch of broken ribs. She just laughed it off. I don't think there is one.
Yeah.
I don't think there is one. No.
All right.
I think she'd be good with everything.
All right, let's continue. Number 7. If I had to do it over again, I would do this differently.
I would have hired a coach earlier instead of spending 3 years of track fees and tires and brakes and maintenance, me just going out there trying to figure it out. I would have saved thousands of dollars and probably cut 3 years off my learning curve.
Yeah. What about you, Todd?
That's a perfect answer. I was blessed from day one. I've got some of the best instructors, best engineers, best setup guys on the planet working with us, and I was just blessed. And coming from the computer world before, understood it and got it. One of the best laptops back in 2009, 5.
Right.
And had all the stuff we have today. So yeah.
I would agree with you, Mike. I would do the same thing. I would just get as much coaching, regardless of your solo status. Just get coaching.
Yeah.
That would definitely expedite that process.
The vertical learning curve.
All right, number 8. This is a good one. You've been given an unlimited budget, but you can only race one car, one track, and one co-driver for the rest of your life. What are you picking?
My co-driver definitely wouldn't be you, so I think I'd probably have to go with Todd.
Okay,
that's nice.
Car, and I'm going to just be my typical answer, and I'd say 911 at some track that has a little bit of everything, so something Spa-ish, Watkins Glen-ish, VIR-ish, something that's got good straights, good technical parts, elevation change.
All right, Todd?
That's a great question. Repeat the question?
If you've been given an unlimited budget, but you can only race one car, one track, and one co-driver for the rest of your life, what are you picking?
GT3 Cup Car 2018 991.2. Co-driver, handful of guys that I would love to race with.
One guy. You got to pick one guy.
One guy.
Not Carlos is already taken.
Carlos is taken. So it would be somebody fun, full of energy, and very energetic. Somebody like a Preston, a Dave, a Twatty, one of those guys. One guy.
One track.
One track. Laguna Seca?
Okay.
Laguna Seca. Yeah, it's a blast. It's so much fun. It has every aspect, or VIR, every aspect of every corner in the U.S. Fantastic. All over the planet. Fantastic. Right. Yeah.
All right, number 9. You're hosting a dinner with 3 racing legends. Dead or alive, who's at the table?
Roger Penske. I'm a Penske fan. So Roger Penske. That's a tough one. I'm an IRL fan, so they're going to be all IRL people. So yeah, I'd go with Penske, maybe like AJ Foyt and one of the Andretti's, Mario probably.
Mm-hmm. Huh. What about you, Todd?
Ken Miles. I almost have to go with Shelby.
Okay.
Carroll Shelby, Ken Miles, and someone like an Andy Pilgrim type guy.
Right.
Probably those 3.
Well, I think Andy's very accessible now.
Yeah, he's around. So
maybe we should have him on the show.
I think he'd be great. Yeah.
I would like to sit down and have dinner maybe with Astana.
No.
Mario Andretti.
Yeah.
Would be one of those as well. Third one, I don't know, maybe one of the NASCAR guys. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Oh, the NASCAR guys probably have time. Oh, an Earnhardt.
Earnhardt, yes.
Or an Earnhardt. Yeah, I'd have to go with an Earnhardt. Yeah, Earnhardt.
All right, number 10. Who's someone in the paddock you would want to hear their story on the podcast? Let's go with you, Mike.
I'll defer to Todd because he spends a lot more time in the paddock than I do. None of my people, my people are all
they don't have interesting stories.
Right. Exactly.
I think someone with really great stories would be Eric Foss, Randy Popst, Chip Van Verst, Jim Drago. There's so many guys with good stories. so many guys with good stories. Dylan McIvern, just so many. Ara Marcassian would be a great one.
Yeah.
He's got great stories. He was a team owner for a long time with FARA Racing, and Hoover. He raced, Jason Hoover raced some great stuff.
So
John
we are
Doonan.
out of time.
Yep.
We are heading to Audubon in a couple weeks.
Right.
Is there something you want to say real quick? I know that you want to invite some Miata drivers to come compete.
Yes, absolutely. Audubon in a few weeks. Guys, come on, let's go. What we're trying to do is create a Miata environment of days of old.
With FARA.
With FARA. Yeah, so with FARA, we offer great contingency. I mean, we offer great money to win. We've had extremely clean racing. Our race director is very stringent, and we have very few double yellows. You get tons of track time for very little cost. And we give away lots of gifts. So come to Audubon. I mean, Nick Leverone, come on. Mark Cefalo, let's go. You guys bring 7-8 cars apiece, and Jim Drago at East Street, let's go. Come on, let's bring some cars and Chris Haldeman.
All right, sounds good. So in the meantime, remember, all the interesting things happen off the racing line. We'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah.
Hey, if you liked what you heard, be sure to click like and subscribe. If you are an HPDE driver, instructor, racer, work at the racetrack, EMT, and you have interesting stories that you would like to share, be sure to reach out to us. We would love to have you on the show.
Everything interesting happens off the racing line. I took the hard road, I've earned these stripes. The road from dreamer to driver ain't always straight. Kept my head down, fueled by faith. I lost some time but found my name.